Good day everyone! Today, I will be discussing two significant topics related to labor struggles in the Philippines. First, I will talk about a major labor-related incident that deeply impacted the country's workers, the Hacienda Luisita Massacre. Then, I will discuss the life legacy of an important Filipino labor leader, Felixberto Olalia Sr., who was assassinated due to his advocacy for workers' rights. Labor rights play a crucial role in ensuring that workers receive fair treatment, just wages, and human working conditions. However, history has shown that labor struggles in the Philippines have often been met with violence and resistance. The Hacienda Luisita Massacre is one of the most tragic significant labor disputes in the Philippine history. Took place on November 16, 2004 in Tarlac, Philippines, where thousands of sugar plantation workers from Hacienda Luisita protested against low wages and unfair labor conditions. The protest ended in bloodshed when government security forces often fired, killing 7 farmers and injuring hundreds more. So what is the Hacienda Luisita Massacre? So, it is a violent dispersal of striking farm workers on November 16, 2004 at Hacienda Luisita, a vast sugar plantation in Tarlac, Philippines, owned by the Cojuangco family, the family of former President Yuri Aquino and her son, former President Noynoy Aquino. Farm workers had long been fighting for land reform, fair wages, and better working conditions. In November 2004, thousands of workers from the United Luisita Workers Union and the Central Azucarera de Tarlac Labor Union went on strike, demanding higher wages, job security, and the distribution of land that was promised them under the government's agrarian reform program. The Cojuangco family denied responsibility, claiming that the leftist groups had instigated the violence. The Hacienda Luisita Massacre remains one of the darkest moments in the history of the Philippine labor struggles and is a symbol land inequality and peasant oppression in the country. Causes of incidents. The roots of the Hacienda Luisita conflicts can be traced to long-standing labor disputes and land ownership issues. Low wages and poor working conditions. The plantation workers of Hacienda Luisita earned as little as 9.50 per day, an amount far below from the minimum wage. Many of them had worked in the plantation for generations but still live in poverty. Land distribution issues. Hacienda Luisita was owned by the Cojuangco family, who acquired the land under the condition that it would eventually be distributed to the farmers. However, instead of land distribution, the owners introduced a stock distribution option, SDO, which allowed them to retain ownership while giving workers a small percentage of company shares. Unjust labor practices and union suspension. Workers demanded better wages and benefits, but their protests were often met with retreats and dismissals. The United Luisita Workers Union and the Central Azucarera de Tarlac Labor Union organized a strike to push for higher wages and rightful land ownership. Key events of the incident. November 6, 2004, around 6,000 workers from Olu and Katlu went on strike, demanding better wages, benefits, and land distribution. They set up of barricades to prevent company operations. November 15, 2004, the Department of Labor and Employment, DOLE, issued an assumptions of jurisdiction order demanding that the workers return to their jobs. However, the strikers refused to back down. November 16, 2004, the massacre. At 3:10 p.m., military and police forces were deployed to break up the strikes under the tear gas and water cannons. Tension escalated. Security forces fired live bullets at the crowd, killing 7 farmers and injuring over 100 people. Some of the victims were shot in the back, indicating that they were running away when they were killed. The government justified the violence by claiming the workers as instigated attack, but witnesses stated that the workers were unarmed. Consequences of the incident: 7 farmers lost their lives, and many others were wounded. Some survivors suffered from permanent injuries. Public outrage and national protests. The massacre sparked nationwide protests, with labor groups, students, and human rights activists demanding justice. The incident was widely condemned both locally and internationally. Legal battles and Supreme Court decision. After years of legal struggles, the Supreme Court of the Philippines ruled in 2012 that the Hacienda Luisita land should be distributed to its farmers. However, land distribution was slow, and some farmers still face harassment and eviction threats from the Juanco family. Lastly, the conclusions. The Hacienda Luisita Massacre exposed the deep inequalities in the Philippine labor system and the government failure to protect its workers. Despite the Supreme Court ruling, many farmers are still fighting for the right to own their land. This tragedy serves as a reminder of the sacrifices made by the workers in their struggle for better wages, fair treatment, and genuine land reform. Their fight continues today, urging the government to uphold justice and protect labor and exploitation. For the second part of my presentation, I will discuss Felixberto Olalia Sr., a well-known labor leader who was murdered due to his advocacy for workers' rights. Olalia was a passionate and fearless leader who dedicated his life to fighting for fair wages, job security, and better working conditions for Filipino workers. He was one of the founders of Kilusang Mayo Ono, KIMU, a militant labor organization that defended worker rights against oppressive business and government policies. So first, for his contribution for the labor movement. Felixberto Olalia Sr. spent decades advocating for workers' rights, leading protests and negotiations with employers to secure better wages and benefits for workers. He was a strong opponent of the dictatorship Ferdinand Marcos, who imposed strict labor policies that suppressed unions and protests. He helped establish Kilusang Mayo Ono, a labor group that remains influential to the fight for workers' rights today. Next is the circumstances of his death. On November 13, 1986, Olalia was kidnapped, tortured, and brutally murdered by suspected members of paramilitary group. His death was seen as an attempt to silence of labor movements and discourage workers from fighting for their rights. His son, Rolando Olalia, also a labor leader, was assassinated in 1986 under similar circumstances. His legacy. Felixberto Olalia Sr. remains a symbol of courage and resistance in the Filipino labor movement. His work continues to inspire labor groups who still demand better wages and protections for workers. His tragic assassination highlights the dangers that labor activists face in their fight for justice. The struggles of laborers in the Philippines have often been met with violence and oppression. The Hacienda Luisita Massacre and the assassination of Felixberto Olalia Sr. are just 2 examples of how workers have been silenced for demanding fair treatment. However, their sacrifices has not been in vain. These events have pushed the labor movement forwards, reminding us of the importance of standing up for workers' rights, fair wages, and human working conditions. As Filipinos, we must continue to support laborers and ensure that their voices are heard. Justice must prevail and workers must never be forgotten. Thank you for listening, and that's all for today.